Welcome to Totally Random Horror Films Cheap Reviews. I'm Tom. In this series, I will randomly select a horror film, serial, television episode, short, or other visual medium between the years of 1895 and 1989 and review it. For my first episode, I was excited to see what random film I would select to review. It ended up being a Three Stooges short called Dopey Dicks. Before I watched the film, I researched to get as much information and context as possible. This information was sourced from IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, and Wikipedia, as well as threestooges.net. The idea to include this film came from an IMDb list of horror films from 1950. Dopey Dicks is the 122nd entry in the Three Stooges series. It was released March 2nd, 1950, and was produced by Hugh McCollum for Columbia Pictures. It was directed by Edward Burns. It stars Mo Howard, Larry Fine, and Shemp Howard. It's a black and white short, but a colorized version can be found. It is 16 minutes long, and it is available on YouTube, Dailymotion, and for download at the Internet Archive. A little background. The Three Stooges were a vaudeville act and a live performance comedy team that began performing in 1922. The team was comprised of three members. Mo Howard and Larry Fine were the two consistent actors, while the third spot was initially filled by one of Mo's brothers, Shemp Howard. When Shemp left to pursue a solo career, the Stooges brought in Mo's youngest brother, Curly Howard. This was the classic Larry, Curly, and Mo Three Stooges gang. They churned out over 90 short films from 1934 to 1946. These were released theatrically and later on television. The team also continued to perform their routines at live events until Curly suffered a stroke. After Curly was out of the picture, Shemp returned to the fold, and it's during that time that Dopey Dicks was filmed. An interesting aside, Shemp died in 1955, 5 years after Dopey Dicks, and had remaining shorts to film to complete his contract. Columbia ended up hiring another actor, Joe Besser, to perform as Shemp. This was done with careful photography, with the actor being shot from behind and such tricks. This procedure of bringing on an actor to perform as another actor became known as the fake Shemp, which you can see in credits on many different films. Dopey Dicks was filmed in January of 1949, but it wasn't released until 14 months later. The name of the film is a spoof on Moby Dick, Herman Melville's 1851 novel, and Dick is short for detective. Aside from the Three Stooges, additional roles are filled by Christine McIntyre as a damsel in distress, whose name isn't given anywhere in the short. She was a regular in the Stooges shorts. Philip Van Zandt was also in the film as a mad professor. He actually had a bit part in Citizen Kane. And Stanley Price was Ralph, the professor's assistant. Time for the review. Every one of my reviews has a potential to contain spoilers. There isn't particularly a lot of horror in this short, but there are enough references and tropes that it deserves at least some mention on Totally Random Horror Films. The Stooges are working to move a detective to a different floor. A damsel in distress enters, believing the Stooges to be detectives, and tells them that there are people following her. This is a common feature of the Three Stooges. They're often presumed to be experts at things that they know nothing about, and the comedy is in their efforts to live up to those expectations. While the Stooges are out searching the halls, an individual with black gloves silences the woman and drags her out. A note leads the Stooges to 275 Mortuary Road, with a cliché lightning storms and a haunted house on the hill. Here we meet a mad scientist and his assistant Ralph, who was the man with the black gloves from earlier. The scientist is only referred to as Professor or Master, and he's building an army of robots, but the robots are poorly programmed, One of them decapitates itself on an overhead light. The professor determines that the robot needs a human head to function properly. He happens to have an awkward sort of guillotine already constructed, with a trash can to catch the head underneath. There's very little in the way of a straight man in this Stooges episode. All of the characters are wacky and over the top, especially the professor, who is absolutely gleeful in his performance, and Ralph, who seems to be attempting to channel Boris Karloff in his facial expressions and movements. The three Stooges show up looking for the damsel just in time for them to donate their own heads. The remainder of the short is just a series of close encounters with the professor and Ralph attempting to collect the heads of the Stooges. Near decapitations and stabbings, a near run-through with a sword, and the swinging of butcher's cleavers and long knives. At one point, Larry peeks up through the center of a table, and Shemp believes Larry has been beheaded. Shemp frees the damsel and discovers that the two fiends are actually escaped mental patients from a nearby hospital. There is also a scene where the professor lurks in the closet and tries to murder the Stooges. In the end, the Stooges escape with the damsel, but their attempt to hitchhike lands them in a car driven by the headless robot, which is probably the most amusing gag. There's some nice work with shadows here. The script and performances are standard Stooges fare. The performances are all what one would expect. Nothing deep going on here, but it's a 16-minute comedy short, worth a watch if you like slapstick. It's fine for kids. It plays like a live-action cartoon. That's all for Totally Random Horror Films Cheap Reviews. Stay tuned for the next Random Horror Review.